welcome to Playwright, a podcast about creating and sharing new ways to play. I am the newly, mostly revitalized Ryan Hamann. You can call me H.
And I am the continuously curious Ryan Quintal. I know both of those start with C, and my last name starts with a Q, but you can call me Q. And why are you newly revitalized here? What did
well, I'm
your
not
sickness?
As sick as I was last week.
I was gonna say your sickness has turned around.
I know, and that was this was the week that I made my big triumphant return to Cane of the Rins for the Assassin's Creed 4 issue, and had a Sound of Play recording with Carl Moon. So, you know, it's just spreading my sickness onto as many podcasts as I possibly could.
I'm so excited to hear you back on these other shows, and so glad that you can work for a cool place that allows you to do cool things.
Unlike the total squares I was working with.
Yeah, the
before.
Absolute, just the stodgy squares from before.
Let's not burn any bridges here. I've enjoyed all of my employers, even the brief little stint at the UPS store that I did back in early grad school. I enjoyed that.
What would you say is speaking of burning bridges, what's the worst job you ever had?
I mean, honestly, I've been pretty lucky. I think that UPS store job is the worst job that I've ever had. And that one is still like, I got along with everyone there. Like, my boss was fine. It was positive. It was just like, I described it as the only job that I've ever had that I wouldn't do if I wasn't getting paid for it. So, you know, if that's the worst you can do, then that's pretty good as far as I'm concerned.
I agree that sounds pretty good to me. My worst job, he would blush to hear me talk about it, but I think he knows, and he might even agree with me. My worst job, my uncle helped me get. It was working in a logistics warehouse, and I was on my feet for 9 hours a day, and I was wearing through pairs of sneakers faster than you could sneeze. And I remember it was the first time I ever related to the feeling of like going to take a bathroom break, not because I needed to go to the bathroom, but I just needed to get away like for a second from the job. And oh my goodness, for all of the workers out there that are fulfilling Amazon packages, or, you know, generally online shoppers, if you can buy something locally, just do it. Don't put these poor people through picking stuff out of these usually not great condition warehouses and really
let's not turn the shoppers and the workers against each other, because they're not the ones who are making the policies here.
Yeah, that's right. That's true. That's true.
The real enemy is the people who are running the companies.
That's right. So all I'm saying is, if you can buy it from a store, let's go support a local business. Shop small.
That's right. And just like the local businesses, we are just about as homegrown as video games can get. In fact, we don't even bother growing them at home or elsewhere. So
we fabricate.
Hugh, why don't you lead off with your video game pitch for the week?
My 3D printed video game idea this week is a new take on PilotWings. So I'm pitching this week a sort of PilotWings world where you can go to different islands or different locales at different points around the world, and you're doing so around the era where each of these places was first getting in to the flying machines business. You're going to places like France, and you're going to get into, France is one of the first places to have a flying balloon. America, you get the Wright brothers craft that you're sort of maneuvering around. Maybe you do some like bamboo copter stuff for Japan, and Italy, you get Da Vinci inventions and that sort of thing. And then you could do these challenges at these locations and maybe even collect regional materials that help you build and modify crafts to go use in like a sandbox mode or something like that. So a worldly PilotWings is what I bring you this week.
All right, sounds good. We'll start the clock there. So are we envisioning this being pretty grounded in, you gave those examples of the real life inventors and the things that were happening in that time period and era. But are we thinking of getting a little bit more fantastical with this, taking it in any kind of like a steampunk direction or an alternate history type thing?
I think we could definitely do that. What I do like about the concept is PilotWings traditionally has been in one locale, one island. Maybe there's a couple different angles and obstacles that get set up on that island. But I love the idea of traveling to places and getting regional music and regional obstacles and going a little bit more in that direction.
We've pitched before a game that is set across a map of the United States and is built to scale. That would be maybe overkill to build the entire world to scale, but even like a scaled down version, I think would be just a real joy to kind of like fly around and explore if you have any level of kind of like, attention to detail in these places and kind of get that touristy sense of where you want to go. And let's take a trip over down to the Sahara Desert and see what that looks like from above.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm kind of racking my brain a little bit about what the format of a PilotWings challenge was. I feel like they're always dropping you with the intention of all you can really do is land, and I think to travel very far distances you would need to be able to potentially climb in your ascend instead of just kind of hit some rings and land. But I don't see why you couldn't do sort of an abbreviated global thing. And then, you get challenges like start in North America and land in Australia and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, maybe you could even kind of progress through time in a way so you can get more and more powerful aircraft as the game goes on, and that would allow you to more easily cross between continents.
That would be cool, and especially if you could like bring materials from, throughout time. Like bamboo is an example of a material that was probably used in early crafts like we see in Japan, mostly abandoned, but it is a very lightweight and tough material, and affordable material. I don't know if you bring in like economies and stuff to this, but potentially saying, hey, have you thought about like taking the Wright brothers plane, but building it out of materials that they wouldn't have had access to?
Yeah, or if you could maybe just based on, I don't know if this is free roam or if it's mission-based. If it's mission-based, like a PilotWings game, this might not really even be a factor. But if you choose to take your craft into other parts of the world, then that could inspire their development of future aircraft, and you can start to see kind of a cross-contamination of ideas.
Oh, that's interesting. So what you're saying is, is the proposal there you could land? What if the whole world was kind of linearly time-based, and depending on where you like launched and landed your craft, you were bringing that sort of technology to that area, and then you saw like that area's ships change? Is that kind of what you were getting to?
Yeah. Or, it would be kind of an overtime thing, so you wouldn't notice it while you were there, but maybe there's like an endurance race type of aspect to it where you have to land and kind of like set up maybe trading routes like in 80 days, or maybe you have to, put yourself up in a hotel overnight just so you're trying to like manage your own wellness over these like multiple day trips. We've also, again, pitched the idea of a game that's based on like it's a mad world where you are tasked with covering a large, expansive land, like an entire state, but you can kind of choose any means to get there. You can drive your car, you can drive to an airport and try to hire a private plane to take you to where you need to go, just whatever it takes to get you to this other location in a multiplayer type of setup. This could be like an around the world in 80 days type of scenario where, maybe there is a level of improvisation, but a lot of it is just trying to survive a journey around the world and
that's interesting.
Taking all these different, dirigibles and hot air balloons and airplanes and boats and trains and whatever it is that you can find yourself in.
I do like the idea of presenting an experience where you take off from any one of the many locales that you want, and then you get into the sort of business having to like loop the globe to return back to that spot. So like you could ask someone if they've done like the China to China run, or just the China Run, right? Where like they are, the China Run sounds like it's a Star Wars thing or something.
Hey, the China Run in less than 12 parsecs.
That's right. You circle the globe starting from a place, and that means depending on where you sort of start that journey, you will have a different vehicle to do things like cross the Pacific Ocean, and like the materials you have access to maybe upgrade or repair or maintain your ship over time change based on the sort of linear path you take. I do like the idea of this feeling a little bit more Paper Airplane-esque and a little bit more sort of Breath of the Wild-y, and like having to, position or move an avatar around and actually like get them up into a high place in order to like actually launch off from certain distances, but that might not be entirely sort of sustainable.
That could be fun. As maybe you have to build your own aircraft using period appropriate materials in a kind of Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts style. You see all those compilation videos of old timey, flying machines that people made that didn't work, and you just think like, what were they thinking? But at the same time, like each of those had kind of a seed of an idea, and that would be kind of fun experience to reproduce, especially if you did have kind of a physics system guiding, if you were given very limited resources and you and whoever was competing against you in this particular game are given like 5 minutes to construct your vehicle, and then you have to basically take it off a cliff and see who flies the longest or who survives the journey even.
That's cool. So now you could get into the business of like, I think it's almost a shame that we kind of did not get the true like online connected PilotWings, because I think now more than ever you're really ripe to have those leaderboards and have a lot of competition globally going to sort of make PilotWings forgive the pun, take off more than it ever has before.
Yeah, of course. I think you called out Breath of the Wild, and obviously that has its physics system with the wind that you can catch. I like the having to factor in the directionality of the wind is always a fun challenge. Having the little kind of air vents that can push you back upwards, or as we call it on the Canon Lorenz podcast, the stacks of steam that push you upwards.
Yeah.
Maybe even being able to shape aspects of your environment to set up obstacle courses and challenge your friends online. We can call that one there. I think we've covered some good ground and some good air as well. So let's come up with a name for this game.
I hesitate to, it sounds very Nintendo to say something like PilotWings World Tour or something like that.
I was thinking maybe like a subtitle to Air is Human.
PilotWings to Air is Human.
Like to Air.
PilotWings Across the Sea. Is there something that like Amelia Earhart was trying to accomplish that was like distinct enough for us to reference?
I think she was just trying to cross the Atlantic, right?
Right. PilotWings Across the Atlantic is kind of cool too.
PilotWings, the Bermuda Triangle.
That's right. Peace, you done.
All right. So what are we settling on here? Let's make a call.
What PilotWings Across the Sea?
All right. That's nice. Yeah, it's the theme song built in as well. Going to my pitch for the day, I've decided that I'm interested in learning more about the demolition industry. I don't really know much about like realistically what it takes to take down a building. I've done it in video games a lot, but obviously you're not really controlling for other buildings in the area, the dust that it kicks up and the potential danger that it poses to your workers and to passersby. So how about a game in which you have to demolish buildings but correctly? It teaches you about points of structural integrity and how to properly take apart a building without injuring employees or damaging other buildings around you. So without going completely simulator style, let's find a way to make that fun as well. So starting the clock there.
I like the idea of having to sort of deconstruct a thing in the correct-ish order.
Yeah, because I realized I don't really know much about that. I was noticing there's a lot of construction happening on Microsoft's property right now. And so, oftentimes I find myself in a meeting room just looking out the window and wow, there's really more of a process to it. Obviously, I think as kids, we all have the fantasy of growing up to be a demolitions expert and, being able to push the plunger and blow up a building that's marked for, not just a random building, marked for a condemned building, or to, take a wrecking ball and knock it into a wall. Like that sounds like fun, but I think that there is really more method to it. You start to kind of disassemble things from the top down whenever you can, and, to not create a whole disaster zone.
What do you think that would, like, do you think the sort of gamey aspect of it, like, comes in with a time element? Like, there's there's some levels that are kind of teaching you to come up to speed, and they've got some generous time limits, and then, like, you're given a project and they're like, okay, like freeform, take out this skyscraper, and you have like 20 minutes to do it, sort of like endurance, like simulator race style. Like, okay, you're actually going to race for 20 minutes straight in this thing.
Well, perhaps maybe there's, did you ever play Boom Blocks on the Nintendo Wii?
I didn't know.
It's a good set of games, 2 games that were produced by Steven Spielberg of all people, that played very much like kind of Jenga, but with Wiimotes. And so, you had these various mini games that were set up and all kind of centered around balancing blocks. And so whether you were throwing stuff at them to try to knock over the tower and get points for yourself without setting your opponent up for easy victories, or whether you were trying to like pull blocks out Jenga style, there was I think that's a possible entry point where instead of just kind of Jenga block towers, you have to pull apart real buildings and, take it apart. You get a point maybe every brick that you take. But if the building crashes, then, that's a game over. Or maybe it is like just a step down from a simulator, kind of like Kerbal Space Program is just like a slightly gentler version of creating actual spacecraft, but still has that kind of educational and really difficult, demanding aspect to it.
I feel like you could offer up in this a Batman Arkham-esque, or potentially even a Resident Evil 2 remake, Ada Wong scanner. How about that for a reference-esque thing where you can see where stuff like gas lines and electrical are connected throughout the building, and actually like learn a little bit about the building's infrastructure and be like, okay, we actually need to, disconnect the sprinkler system in order to, move forward. And if you're not kind of putting rooms, like deconstructing rooms in the right order, you're cutting off different paths and you're not going to be able to finish the level in the time allotted.
Yeah, maybe this is like a strategy game where you're managing like your little workforce, and it has to be safe for them to get to wherever they need to go, kind of like Lemmings, but, not completely autonomous. So, you have to manage the structure of the building. You have to manage you don't want to cause a gas leak. I assume the gas to the building be turned off, but, maybe just to raise the stakes. And then maybe you can even kind of zoom into any worker and get like a boots on the ground experience of, what they're doing, or you could do it yourself, just to give you that kind of intimate feel of being a part of, because there's something that's like very dramatic and scary about that as well, being in a building as it's being deconstructed. I really want to like map out what the load bearing supports are, and maybe if we could even pull in some of the real visual language that actual blueprints use, so that it can teach people for actual kind of on the site construction type of work.
Yeah, if you had, for example, the blueprints were the way that you could like mark out and path out stuff for your workers to actually pursue. And then you could actually try and orchestrate things like, let's make sure that room A and B are like properly set up to, collapse once we take out room C. And you're sort of orchestrating to make sure that certain things happen at the same time because deconstruction, as you see in reality, kind of happens like slowly, bit by bit, and then all at once in large chunks. So a lot of the setup and prep of okay, I got everything here. We've got this, we're going to do a controlled burn on a particular wall, stuff like that, where you're trying to do it as safely as possible, but then go ahead and translate it into something that is, effective and cascading in its results.
Maybe there are different types of buildings. Maybe there are some that are like oil rigs at sea, or some that, I don't know, what types of different types of buildings do you think would be interesting to, I always wonder about those homes that you see on like Hollywood Hills that are supported by just like planks extending as they jut out dangerously, so the entire house is kind of balanced over the cliff face.
You're of course referencing my favorite movie, Deep Blue Sea, I'm sure, as you know, where or any of those many sort of underwater horror movies where people are sort of trapped underwater. I actually think there's another one called Underwater that's coming out soon in theaters, where you have the added pressure of the sea and what it does to structural environments, and how, potentially the wrong deconstruction at the wrong point will flood and cause major damage in the facility. So if you made it almost have the feeling that you would have of sort of managing a precarious set of Jenga blocks to take apart one of these buildings and really make it feel like a puzzle, with some elements of planning, navigating the blueprints and the structure of it. You're maybe you can't necessarily shut off gas or whatever, but your awareness of where those systems sit is part and parcel with solving the puzzle.
Maybe there could be, if something does go wrong, then you have to kind of manage the disaster relief in a way, whether it's a fire that kicks up, you have to fly in like a chopper with the water on it, or maybe you have to manage evacuation from a part of town if you mess up too badly. I'm not sure how grand in scale we want this to get, because that obviously increases dev time.
I'm trying to think what else makes taking apart a building interesting. I think there's some level of management of the lot as well, planning out what sections of road you're going to have shut off during certain parts of the build. It seems like public works projects are always 99% planning, and then 10% of it is actually, all right, do the thing. And so making sure that the things that will fall safely, and the building will sort of collapse in a controlled way, and that you're collecting the debris in right places. Maybe now you're into PilotWings, right? The debris has to land correctly and all that.
Yeah. Maybe you have to choose what roads to shut down as your trucks are getting in and out, or as there are maybe potentially dangerous scenarios. I would love for all of the aspects of management of cranes and all of that to be manual. So you have to find the appropriate counterbalances to make sure that they don't topple over. All of that you don't think about until you have to be put in charge of it.
Yeah, that's really cool. And then you have something to planning out potentially the escape route as well, and ensuring that your workers all have a safe way of getting out of the building as it's sort of crumbling, controlled wise around them.
Yeah, well, we're out of time there. Let's close it down, come up with a name. I think the first thing that jumps to my mind, if you're controlling a group of workers that are working in the demolitions field, is Demolition Men.
Yeah. I mean, that works for me. I had no complaints from Demolition Men to me. Wesley Snipes is.
We'll be hearing from their lawyers, but for now, it's a fine enough pseudonym. Our community pitch today, this comes from our community. This was submitted on playwrightcast.com/pitch. Of course, this comes from Sam R., who says, I recently read a Vice article which talked about Palantir and how basically data analysis can be used for a bunch of unsettling stuff. In the article, there are several videos showing how data analysis can be used to find information such as working out which employee has whistleblown. The software, Palantir, looks almost like a video game. I think a cool idea would be to use a similar interface for solving puzzles, which are similar to Cicada 3301. Puzzles could be taken from real-life examples, or they could be original. There could even be ways for players to create their own puzzles. The game could obviously have multiple ways of achieving the correct solution, and maybe even hints, as some of the puzzles could be quite complex. Thank you very much for that one. Let's start the clock and crack down on those whistleblowers. So obviously, I think the perspective that you and I would take in real life is that whistleblowing is a good thing. And if your company is doing unethical things, then they should be held accountable for what they're doing. But just for the sake of the fiction, obviously, we are no strangers in video games to being cast in the roles of absolute despicable people. So we are going to be taking the side of the corporation, absolutely cracking down on those who are trying to hold them accountable. Springs to mind a game called Orwell. It has a subtitle that I'm not remembering offhand, but it is a game where you basically play like a government agency that's trying to like crack down on people with terroristic tendencies, in heavy quotes, which basically means those whose political ideologies don't align with the ruling class. And to find out more about the suspects that they send you after, you have to you're given access to like their social media, their text messages, like all of these disparate pieces of data, these sources of data, and you have to kind of like put together like a profile of each character and try to predict where they're going to be and find more efficient ways to stalk them, essentially. It's an interesting game, and I think we can do some similar things here.
So with this email coming in, I went and I checked out, I think, one of the articles in question, although Vice and Motherboard have a lot of articles about the sort of software that Palantir has. And they're doing things like looking at data across the web of the way someone is described in a quote, like a top-level company executive. And then they're looking at top-level company executives' page and seeing like events that they went to outside of work and what other employees were possibly tagged into those events. And all this sort of like really creepy facial recognition stuff that, is... There's no getting around it, and it's spying on, your own people, for the sake of, I guess, like protecting company secrets. Cool. I'm sure it could be used for protecting state secrets and all sorts of things. But one of the things that's interesting about it is you're kind of always like browsing a tree of suspects. And I think that there are a lot of video games that deal in like the whodunit or the mystery aspect of like solving a case. For example, we talk about cop games a lot on this show, but like not through the lens of data visualization of being able to see people on a map and seeing associates of those people and being able to drill into informations about the associates and comb through their social profiles, and like basically a simulator of a bunch of people's publicly accessible information. And that's kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, I feel like these types of games generally, and fiction in general, tend to put us in the boots of either people who are resisting and are being spied upon, or the governments that are spying at a very, very high level. Whereas I think the challenges of having the somewhat more restricted access of a business instead of a government is interesting as well. As you only have access to things that are publicly available, but then at the same time, you'd be surprised, and maybe as an educational effort, like what is still traceable with what is publicly available.
Yeah. Although increasingly, depending on what people's social media presence looks like, that information is nearly identical what a state can see and what a company can see.
Right.
The sort of reality of dealing with what you can see about someone. I think I've pitched as a party game before, like a game where you have access to someone's entire social media profile, and then you have to sort of like answer a quiz as you pretend to be them. So there's like that falsifying an identity. And I'm trying to think about like what it's almost like the way some of the visuals of this, and it's a little bit hard to describe, but just imagine like a family tree, only it's trying to express relationships of people rather than just parentage or lineage. What if you did like, is there an arcade version of this that is like a 6 degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon sort of thing?
Possibly. Like you're trying to link two people as quickly as possible, but unless you really know anything about them, you're just kind of randomly clicking around.
I think you might at first, unless you like you'd have to give someone tools to quickly hone down on details, right?
Yeah, and that's interesting. Maybe like there's a speed aspect of this where you could speed run the games, find those links quickly, discover who might be. If somebody has their social network profile pretty locked down, then maybe their friend who you have picked up has similar interests, doesn't have that same level of security, and you can use that friend to by proxy kind of spy on the person that you are going after. I feel like we also have to take some level of social responsibility, since online stalking is already a huge problem. Like, are we actually going to be teaching people how to more efficiently stalk people online? Because we would probably want to take some measure to make sure we're not giving people actual training and tools to do that.
Yeah, for sure. I guess it's a little bit about how it's handled in terms of, I think there is realistically like, you can't find out information about this person. Well, guess what? Their friend tagged them in a photo, and like, what does that give you access to when you're living in that world? So in that way, like, to do one, you kind of are doing the other by default.
Maybe there are ways to also teach people how to protect themselves from this type of invasive spying, to maybe they put you on the other side as well. Maybe there's even like a competitive mode where you have to, one person is tasked with finding out who, is perpetrating a certain crime while the other person is actually perpetrating it and trying to do their best to cover their tracks online.
That is interesting. Like, it's almost taking it into the level of HR software where you're like, and what did this person not do? They didn't control their privacy on their Facebook page. And that was the thing that did it. So you could kind of have those things baked in either explicitly or implicitly. I do like the idea of like using an opportunity to teach people all the ways that they sort of out themselves online, but I don't know if this adds anything to the game or not. It's more of an anecdote, but I learned that one of the things that Instagram does, Instagram starts counting up the milliseconds that you are not scrolling when you are looking through profiles. So anytime you like stop scrolling, they're like, okay, the timer begins. And that is a way for them to glean just how much time you're spending looking at what in the app. And that like on a macro scale is just like, oh, people look at pictures more than they look at comments or whatever. But on the micro scale is, H and Q have increasingly been looking at pictures of people with dogs and families. Maybe they're thinking about getting a dog, and let's sell them, dog supplies or something, or let's tell them, where to go get a puppy and that sort of thing. So maybe there's also there's like the build an algorithm sort of thing, and you get into almost a coding game to do that sort of stuff.
Or if there was kind of like a real drag and drop way to create algorithmic trees to trace these behaviors and find clever ways. That's interesting. That's really troubling now. I don't like that at all.
Yeah, sorry. That probably just ruined a bunch of people's day. There is something to that, though. I think like in the way, popular game recently was Baba Is You, which is like a kind of, basic and not so basic programming game in many ways. And I think like being able to use that and leverage that and say, hey, what if you gave the user the mission of how would you figure out what this person wants to buy, and like have them write something of like, Well, I would track their location back and forth from their home for a week. And then I'm seeing all the businesses that they stop at. And then I'm like, okay, I think they want to buy shirts based on that. So it's all that sort of behavioral stuff that we do that is connected and in that way is educational. And you let people see, oh, if somebody did have access to my location over a long period of time, they could see these sort of extraordinary things about my own behavior.
All right. Well, we have to stop thinking about this. Let's close that down. Let's come up with a name for it. PrivaSee is a good word to put in there, I feel like.
Yeah. Even like Snoop. Let's face it. It's
maybe it's PrivaSee, but C spelled out SEE.
PrivaSee. Okay, that's cool. Yeah. And you do like
it's gonna be a cute name for
stuff.
A very sinister game.
If we'll put it in a bold, maybe italic font with some. We'll give it a texture. We can make it look sinister.
Anyways, thank you very much, Sam R, for submitting that one. That was submitted through our website at playwrightcast.com/pitch. You can, community members, submit a pitch through our Twitter at PlaywrightCast or through our email, playwrightcast@gmail.com.
Special thank you to PROTODOME for the use of our theme song, Hello World, off the album Blue Noise. And of course, thank you to the Kane and Rince Podcast Network. All great shows where you can now hear the triumphant return of Mr. H reviewing video games here on the Kane and Rince Podcast. And then hear him again in Sound of Play, and you're listening to him on this show. You know what? Is this the Ryan Hamann Network? I'm starting to realize it's all clicking for me.
I got to take over the Sausage Factory.
That's right. Sausage Factory, where they interview just Ryan Hamann. All sorts of good shows. You got to go.
It's like the last business on the block that the mogul hasn't muscled out of town yet.
That's right. You're the Langoliers. You're just eating all podcast history. And man, a Langoliers game. That you know what? I'm going to save it for the last pitch of the day. That's what I think I'm going to do.
On that note, what is the miniature pitch you want to take us out with?
Why don't we do a game where you play as someone running or trying to combat the Langoliers, which are demons that are trying to eat the past, which is a weird concept, but go read the book or watch the really awful made-for-TV movie. It's kind of worth your time. It'll be shorter than It Chapter 1 and 2 together, I promise.
All right. Well, we'll see you next week.
Bye.